Hello, welcome everyone. We're still letting some folks in from the waiting room. Thank you for being with us today on International Women's Day of all days to talk more about this guide to strengthening gender integration in climate finance projects. And we'll just wait maybe one more minute before giving the logistics announcements just to make sure everyone is in the room. Welcome to those just joining. Okay, so we have live language interpretation available in this webinar today. To activate the Zoom interpretation, please click the globe in the lower right side of your screen and choose what language you would like to listen in. And I'll pass it to our other interpreters to give this announcement in French and Spanish. So I'll pass it first to our Spanish interpretation team.
Gracias, Andrea. Buenos días. Mi nombre es María Angélica, mis pronombres son ella y ellex, y mi colega Flavia y yo proveeremos interpretación en español. Si ustedes están conectados a la reunión en el computador, van a ver abajo a mano derecha un globo que dice interpretación. Por favor, háganle clic, elijan el idioma que prefieran y eso es todo. Si se están conectando a la reunión desde su teléfono, cuando tengan la reunión de Zoom abierta en el teléfono, por favor toquen la pantalla del teléfono. Abajo a mano derecha ven tres punticos que dice más. Por favor, tóquenlos. Ahí eligen interpretación de idiomas, el idioma que prefieran. Y arriba a mano derecha ponen finalizado o done. Vamos a poner las instrucciones en el chat a lo largo de la reunión. Gracias y se lo paso a mis colegas del equipo de francés.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Vous avez donc une option interprétation qui est disponible en cliquant sur le petit symbole de globe interprétation en bas de votre écran, en bas à droite. Si vous nous suivez depuis un téléphone portable, vous trouverez cette option en cliquant sur les trois petits points. Vous sélectionnez la langue et vous confirmez la langue que vous souhaitez écouter. Voilà, merci.
Thank you so much, Chloe. So now that we're all in the correct interpretation channel, and welcome to all who have just joined. Thank you for being with us today. I will actually pass it to our opening remarks. I'll pass it to Dr. Shaynas Musa, Director of CDKN, to start us off.
Yeah, thank you. So greetings to you all, and it's so exciting to see so many people attending the event because I just assumed there'd be lots going on because it is International Women's Day. So my name is Shaynas Musa and I'm the Director of the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, or CDKN, and we are based at South North, which is an NGO based in Cape Town. And it is my utter privilege to be speaking to you here today. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you today on behalf of CDKN, whose mission it is to combine knowledge and research to enhance the quality of life for those most vulnerable to climate change. One of the key themes at CDKN is the integration of gender and social inclusion into climate action, along with climate finance. As we celebrate International Women's Day, I would like to welcome you to today's very timely webinar. It is a joint effort between CDKN and WeDo, and it's a guide to strengthening gender integration in climate finance projects. It was initially launched at COP26, the end of last year in Glasgow. The webinar aims to highlight the International Women's Day theme of gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow, which is under the hashtag Break the Bias. Whether deliberate or unintentional, makes it difficult to create a sustainable world. Also, simply knowing there is a bias is not enough. We need action to break the bias and mainstream gender into our everyday thinking and doing. This is particularly important and relevant in the context of climate change, one of the greatest global challenges of the 21st century. Without achieving gender equality, a sustainable and equitable future is way beyond our grasp. It is therefore important that the voices of women and other marginalized communities feature strongly in the conception, planning, and implementation of climate finance projects, as they are often the ones at the forefront of the impacts of climate change. Through this event, we would like to share the recommendations from the guide, which is quite a simple framework to align our thinking with direct and powerful opportunities for advancing gender equality. I encourage you all as individuals, communities, organizations, and partnerships to help break the bias and help forge an inclusive world. And I'd like to do the break the bias hashtag again because I quite like it. Before I close, I would like to thank all our panelists and attendees for joining us today. We have a phenomenal turnout, so I'm quite blown away by the turnout. Thank you to each of you for being here. We are especially grateful to WIDO for their partnership in preparing this highly relevant report and for organizing this webinar. And it was amazing working with such a dynamic group of women. With this, I wish you all a good event and happy International Women's Day as I hand back to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musa. And again, happy International Women's Day to everyone here. Next, we will hear opening remarks from Ms. Wanahamisi Singano, or Mishi Singano, who is a Senior Global Policy Lead here at WIDO. Mishi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and happy International Women's Day, everyone. As I've been introduced, my name is Wanahamisi Singano, and I'm currently serving as a Senior Policy Lead at WIDO. And again, happy International Women's Day. Just to say, we at WIDO, we are always glad to share experiences and expertise when it comes to climate finance. And as we know, that transforming finance to center and advance gender equality is necessary to full and effective way to address climate crisis. This work that we'll be talking today complement our large organization work on gender and climate finance, and it includes advocacy as well as direct funding as we continue to envision and demonstrate what feminist climate finance can and should be. While the recommendation presented today here won't ensure that our climate finance flows are truly feminist, but we do hope they offer concrete ways to improve current practices and provide a better approach to achieve our gender and climate goal. Our goal is to ensure accessibility and practicality. As we hope, you will find that in today's presentation and in today's panel discussion, but also in the guide itself, that is really practical and it offers that opportunity to integrate gender. So kindly feel inspired and empowered to read the full guide, but also to read the part which you feel might be relevant to you. One of the key elements of this guide, and one that is really close to my heart, is the discussion around gender expertise, what it is, who hold it, how is it integrated, and rather than simply endorsing a model that focuses on hiring and paying firms or individuals at a certain stage, but how can we ground our knowledge and how can we use gender expertise in the communities and in local level? We know that gender expertise exists not only in those contracted services and consultants, but also we know that they exist in the communities and within various women's rights and feminist organizations. So recognition of this local expertise, valuing them, and creating space and granting resource for local-led leadership, whether in adaptation or mitigation or loss and damage, is critical to transform our approaches to climate finance. And ultimately, we will determine whether our efforts to address climate change are effectively or not. So I'd like to take this opportunity today to invite you to shift the thinking in ways that will strengthen the project and also recognize that there is limitation in different models that we are using. And I would really, as it has been said, like to thank all of you for joining us today. We know it's a day that it has a number of events, but thank you for coming to this event, and I wish all of us a successful discussion. Kindly welcome and to change the system for climate justice and be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mishi. And I'm all for that call to action to change systems at the end of the day. It's what we have to do. Bear with me as I get the slides up again. So next, I'll actually pass it to my other colleague, Tara Daniel, who's also Senior Program Manager at We Do, who will be presenting next.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So I will be presenting the report, this guide that we're here to talk about today, and that'll be the first half of our program, is delving into some insights and hopefully encouraging you to go search out and read the guide in full. And then I will be very happy to pass to my colleague Marie, who will be leading a panel of several discussants who are going to be commenting on various aspects of the guide and what they find useful from their experience integrating gender into climate finance projects. We'll then have a few minutes at the end for some questions and a couple of poll questions for you all as well using the Zoom platform. And I really hope that you enjoy this conversation. So first, the guide. I had the opportunity when working on this project to speak with gender experts and others engaged in the project cycle of climate finance projects. And I was drawing from their collective experience across dozens, possibly hundreds of projects. I took what I was hearing forward in additional interviews. I was testing assumptions. I wanted to understand the shared challenges and opportunities. This framework that you're looking at right now, this is what I heard. This represents the collective wisdom of these interviewees. And there are other elements to the guide, including the review of select projects across the 4 primary multilateral climate funds, where insights and applications of this framework were commented on. But I'm going to limit my comments today to this framework, given the time that we have together. So first, these 6 recommendations are recommendations for what? They are recommendations for doing this work better. They represent points of inflection, moments where there are opportunities to really strengthen gender integration, to take a project to the next level, wherever it may be on that spectrum of gender sensitivity or gender mainstreaming or gender transformation. Unfortunately, many of the interviewees, though, were identifying these as the moments where the opposite choice was made. So we really want to reframe this as the opportunities based in real-world experience to strengthen gender integration. We also recognize that there are real barriers and complexities to implementing these recommendations, but we hope that by surfacing them, any implementing entities are able to plan with intentionality and to better direct resources to address these challenges and navigate these complexities. And I'm sure that's something we'll be talking about a bit more in our discussion later. We also recognize the various enabling factors within the project landscape, whether that's within the country or region in which the project is being designed and implemented, or the various entities involved in the design, implementation, and monitoring. Lastly, we also wanted to highlight some considerations for the climate funds in really recognizing this incredible role that often individual gender and climate change consultants are playing, and how that could influence how climate funds are considering the tools, the resources, and the support they give for the integration of gender in their climate finance projects. So with that, I want to delve quickly into the 6 recommendations. The first thing that I heard was this importance of leading with local gender expertise, recognizing that for a project to truly aspire to advancing gender equality, there must be an understanding of the local community or communities, including language, customs, and gender dynamics. And this is really important so that we're recognizing different types of gender expertise as well. There's a section of the guide that talks about how expertise is not just held within individuals, but by organizations, grassroots organizations, women's rights organizations, feminist organizations, community-centered organizations that can also be real partners in contributing expertise. We know that understanding is really complemented by participation. And so we also want to be thinking about throughout these recommendations, ways not just to consult with or ask for knowledge, but ask for the application of skills, ask for the true partnership and collaboration of these gender experts, and in recognizing the various ways that their expertise may be shown. So as we move on to the next recommendation, we are really understanding and recognizing that this participation is necessary from the local level, which I was just talking about, all the way into national gender institutions, recognizing that we need to leverage our existing knowledge, data, and resources at all levels, including national gender machineries, to really ensure that we're building something better and that we're not reinventing the wheel, and that we can use baseline data from other projects or other institutions and other entities, so that then as we move on to our third recommendation, we have the ability to gather even better data moving forward. So on this third recommendation, we know that a project should start off with qualitative and quantitative data. Andrea, can you move to the next slide? It might be a pause on my screen though. Thank you. With gender analyses that can provide a real baseline of information. This is not just information about the number of males and females participating in the stakeholder meetings that might be happening during project design and kickoff, but this is data about gendered access to resources, about time and labor allocation, about the status of laws as well as the adherence to laws and policies, including informal and formal customs that promote or detract from gender equality. It's really important that we recognize this from the beginning so that we're moving forward with incredible intentionality throughout the project and the ability to measure progress. As we turn to the fourth recommendation, we want to recognize how much a project team and how it's constituted really influences a project. When gender consultants are brought on with different or shorter timelines than other experts within the team, when there's many different ways that it can be signaled that their expertise may not be as valued as other team members, then gender equality concepts and practices are less likely to be integrated fully throughout a project. So it's important within the team, the value that we're giving to gender is important for signaling the ways in which we are partnering with gender specialists and recognizing gender expertise in various ways, not only the individual roles of consultants, but again, partnering with local organizations and recognizing that this orientation needs to be team-wide. We'll revisit that in just another moment, but first, the fifth recommendation is this importance of continuity. We heard from project teams who had been involved in designing the gender action plans or had been very much engaged in doing the gender analyses work of projects in the design phase that then felt that their recommendations, their knowledge, really that baseline of work was not taken forward into implementation and monitoring. So it's really important that we have this continuity between design and implementation through, again, this intentionality of processes, recognizing that the design phase is not simply about producing a gender action plan, for example, for a project, but really surfacing all of the assumptions that have been made, all of the decisions that have been made to decide on those particular activities and recognizing what the strategic value may be in pursuing certain directions within a project rather than other directions. Lastly, we're going to turn back to this importance of the team for this next and of course, this is the team as we're considering design teams, as implementation teams, the various constellations of teams that we know are working across years and across very different timelines to build a project and to implement and monitor a project. But as we saw in the fourth recommendation, and fully valuing gender expertise and gender specialists as team members that are contributing at a vital technical level, we can also improve this valuation of gender equality concepts and practices through team-wide capacity building opportunities to bring along the entire team on better appreciating and understanding the myriad links between gender and climate change. This broad appreciation is going to increase not only the capacity, but the resources for truly integrating gender in our climate finance projects. So thank you for joining me for that brief look at those 6 recommendations. And I would like to pass to my colleague Marie, who will be introducing our discussion panel as they comment particularly on those recommendations, but again, reminding you that there's other elements to the guide and to the report that we hope that you will find useful. Marie?
Thank you so much, Tara, and welcome to our panelists. We have an esteemed panel today. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Saraswati Rodriguez, who is an international specialist in gender, climate change, and social and environmental safeguards. She is an anthropologist by training, and she works to highlight, strengthen, and include gender approaches in environmental programs, especially climate change ones. Now, for the last 10 years, she's been working in the Andean region and in recent years also in South and Central America, advising such international institutions as the United Nations Development Programme, UN Women, UN Environment Programme, Food and Agriculture Organization, and World Food Programme. So Saraswati, please tell us, based on your extensive experience as a practitioner who's worked on many projects, how do the recommendations of the report land with you? How do you think these recommendations help project teams who are designing, implementing, and indeed monitoring climate finance projects?
Muchas gracias. Buenos días.
Thank you. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be able to be here with you today. Thank you for Widu for the invitation. This document is a document that has very enriching information and surely is going to add to many of the practitioners who work in the day-to-day for gender focus. To begin with, I think it's very important to highlight that it's a step-by-step to be able to be gender responsible for the integration of women. In that sense, to show that it is very important to continue working in identifying the nuances and the needs of gender integration. And at the end of the presentation, what Tara said, the specific link with gender expertise, with the people who are experts in gender, because within the teams, these experts in gender have a very particular knowledge that is going to add to identifying the actions in the project in itself. In that way, they're also going to add to the link between the environmental and gender safeguards, and they're going to give an adequate transversalization. Very often, when we think of the incorporation of gender inclusion, we think of it at the end of the design of the project. But what we need is to have to do this exercise from the very beginning, as it is said in the report. We also wanted to add that continuing to work in the adequate visibilization of the gender nuances and participation projects is very important, as well as consultation, which needs to be taking place throughout the design process, as well as the implementation of the project. Very often we don't make that link between the gender analysis documents and the safeguard framework at the beginning, and then we have actions that end up not being linked. In this document, we can see some of the key elements that allow us to do that exercise throughout, and I think they're going to be very helpful for us who work in the day-to-day in this field. Finally, to recommend to you that you can make use of this tool, where you're going to find examples and a methodological process that is going to allow you to improve your transversalization. Remember that we still have a lot to advance in gender, climate, and in particular in gender financing. We have a very useful tool that is going to allow us to advance more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I see there are already some useful questions in the chat box, so we'll return to you, Saraswati. But I want to make sure the other panelists have got time to intervene. So we're going to move now to Nozipo Wright. Good day, Nozipo. She is a gender analysis specialist with a decade and a half's experience in mobilizing policymakers and key stakeholders around gender analysis and action planning, with a background in energy management. Her recent work includes undertaking gender studies for development projects in several African countries. This extends as far as the rangelands of Botswana, for example, and other African projects which are being prepared for submission to the Global Environment Facility. So, Nozipo, which of the recommendations do you find to be most useful in your work, and you hope that project teams may take on board?
Hi, everyone. And happy International Women's Day. It's good to be here, and we are so happy that so many of you are able to attend today. I had the opportunity or the privilege to work with a project within a project proposal that was submitted to the Global Environment Facility, or the Green Climate Fund. That's the one project that just got approved last year by the Green Climate Fund. And looking at the recommendations that have been realized in this report by WIDO, the first recommendation that I find to be quite important, I've looked at like 4 of them, is to lead with the gender expertise. And I worked with I was the local gender expert within this project. Where we worked with a consultancy firm that had experience in working on proposals and having very successful proposals submitted to the Green Climate Fund. And we worked with that consultancy firm. There was also a group of us local consultants from the country, from Botswana. So it was 2 consultancy teams from South Africa and from Botswana, and I was the gender expert. The consultancy firm from South Africa, the one that had more experience dealing with the accredited agency or submitting proposals, that firm also had a gender expert who supported my work, and also the accredited agency through which we were submitting the proposal also had a gender expert who supported and reviewed my reports and the frameworks and the gender action plan. So the local gender expertise came through me. I knew the area very well, the country, obviously I'm from Botswana, and that worked well in terms of working with the Department of Gender Affairs. And that leads me to the next recommendation, which is leverage local women's groups and national gender institutions. Working with women's groups, when we went to the field, they were the first point of contact, the chiefs and the women's groups, as well as while we were still in the city within the national government, I worked and I have a long working relationship with the Department of Gender Affairs. So and they were kept, I briefed them all step of the way of the project proposal, and they in the end approved the gender action plan after I presented it to them. And one thing that I also found within the local women's groups is that they will have like champions that you can recognize during implementation or work with during implementation. And they can also help to make sure that the project, the gender integration, the measures that have been developed for implementation, gender measures, and the activities, that everything is adhered to at the local level. The next recommendation is integrate gender specialists within the team. Just give me a second. No. The next one is collect the right gender data from the start. Especially this one I found to be quite important during preparation of the proposal. This is the GCF proposal, collecting gender data at the start. And this helped, especially when you looked at time use as well as access to resources. You would one of the things that I found was that it's really amazing how little, it's shocking how little time or extra time that most women have in the day to be able to be engaged or to engage in other activities. And when you develop the gender action plan, you may find yourself piggybacking on activities like government activities that the activities that the government is already implementing for the communities. You may need to get the project to work within government programs, because there can only be so much time in the day that the women are able to participate. And then this, the final recommendation is integrate gender specialists within the team. This I found to be critical. And when I developed the gender action plan, I included a gender officer, developed the terms of reference for the gender officer, and also that they would be they would get a full salary. They would get a proper salary, just like members of the rest of the members of the implementation team. And as we speak, the post has been advertised for the gender officer for the project, and the gender officer is going to be part of the senior management team, and she or he is going to be in charge of ensuring that the gender action plan is implemented. And the activities of the gender action plan, of course, are they've been allocated resources. So this avoids, as the recommendation also mentions, this avoids the gender being siloed or being secondary or being like a standalone. It's fully integrated in this program, and we will see how it goes. But so far so good. So far they're going well. And the gender officer will be working with the Department of Gender Affairs. Will update them about the developments or implementation of gender within the project. I also recommended that some graduates, gender studies graduates from the local university, the ones that would be nearby, come from the local communities or live nearby where the project is going to be implemented, that because government has an attachment program, that they be attached. These are gender graduates, gender studies graduates, that they be attached to the program so that they can enhance their skills and also and learn. The gender officer also, before I forget, is going to be supported by the Department of Gender Affairs as gender officers. The government has gender officers in the districts, and these gender officers, I spoke to the department, requested that they support or they work with the project's gender officer during implementation. Thank you. I hope I answered that question. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm just really struck by how many innovative ideas you have there for institutional mainstreaming. To really make the gender and the climate objectives come together and be adequately delivered together. So thanks very much, Nozipo. Third on our panel, we have joining us from Latin America, we have Andrea Rodriguez. Good day, good morning to you, Andrea. She is an international environmental lawyer with over 12 years of experience in climate finance policy, working at the Fundación Avina as the regional manager of the Climate Action Programme. And this is actually, Fundación Avina is itself a regional direct access accredited entity to the Green Climate Fund. So she's going to be able to bring us the point of view, I think, of being a GCF entity. So my question for you, Andrea, is really many entities are implementing climate projects and acknowledging the overall importance of gender within projects. But when it comes down to it, what are the challenges and opportunities for putting gender responsive climate action into operation? What are some of the challenges for taking forward some of the recommendations in this guide, and how do you overcome them? Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. And I would like to say congratulations for the work. I think it's fantastic to see the guides. They're going to be, I mean, they are very useful today, and they will be very useful for many of stakeholders and actors out there that are always seeking to have this type of information. I would like to highlight a couple of challenges that we normally face, and this is analyzing the recommendations that you have provided and also some opportunities. First of all, it's important to say that as Fundación Avina, we fully align and fully appreciate the recommendations that are provided. We think that they are right on track, and I wish every entity would have the capacity to implement them accordingly. And referring to the challenges, I would say one of the first elements that we see, or the challenges that we have as a direct access entity, is I would say, limited capacities and given the size of the organization that we have, because as you know, particularly with the GCF, every entity is different in size, different in capacities, and we normally don't have perhaps the infrastructure in place in terms of having all the particular expertise that we would need for every project that we want to develop. So often teams have to be working on multiple projects, engaging with multiple stakeholders and multiple even financial mechanisms at the same time. And that, of course, creates a burden, and it creates a limited possibility to integrate all the elements that are needed in a project in a very effective manner. Just to give an example with Fundación Avina, Fundación Avina does have gender expertise because we're fully committed to ensure that all our programs, not just climate change, but all our programs more and more improve the gender sensitive approach. However, it's perhaps one person trying to do the work with multiple programs at the same time. So again, I think that's, I would say, the reality of many accredited entities that have smaller capacities and that don't necessarily have the resources and the capacities to have a gender permanent person within the teams. The other challenge that I think it's, or at least during project design that we've identified, is that finding local expertise on gender and climate combined is it's rather difficult to us, at least. We often find gender experts in the region, but whenever we have to go and work, particularly in a community, and we're trying to find an expertise with, again, both climate and gender, we think it's very difficult. And what's the issue with that? Because we know that having a person, an expert on gender, and bringing the gender perspective, particularly on explaining the local conditions, is very, very useful. But what often happens with projects, particularly for the Green Climate Fund, is that many of the recommendations that should be included within the gender action plans are development-related recommendations or elements that we as a project cannot respond to, or we cannot provide a solution for. So often they go beyond the scope of the climate rationale and the climate project in itself. And that becomes challenging because, and I don't think it's in terms of the work what we do, or the work that I would say the entire community would want to do, is often with the financial mechanism that you're trying to access to and the rules that this financial mechanism have. And at the same time, it's a reflection in terms of the importance of working with development and climate related issues combined, which often many financial institutions, particularly those working with climate change, do not have that particular approach. So that's an issue that we always find when it comes to designing projects and trying to combine this double expertise that is needed to ensure that financial resources come, and flow to communities, but at the same time, we see that there is somehow a limited opportunity in terms of the type of responses that we can provide, because often the needs are beyond the climate change problem that a particular community is facing. Now, in terms of the opportunities, I think I would like to highlight two. One is the one related to knowledge sharing and information. I think for Fundación Avina, we value and we're very much involved in any process that fosters knowledge sharing and information and exchange. We know that it's a very important process, and this is, processes that need to take in place across sectors, across countries, across regions. In fact, we do promote a lot of South-South learning and exchange. So we believe that, and I know that this is something that this community does a lot as well, but I think it would be very important for accredited entities to also do more, foster more, or promote more processes, South-South learning related to gender, on gender experiences. What are they dealing with? What are the challenges that we may have, and what are the opportunities, and also how we can learn from our own peers. So I'm taking this reflection, and it's something that please count me in for future initiatives as this one, because I believe that are very useful, not just for Fundación Avina, but for other entities with similar capacities as the ones we have. And finally, regarding one of the recommendations on the enabling factors, such as national level planning and policies. I think this element is crucial, because often many projects that are designed have the element of creating particular policies. And when we think about policies, we use them because they are important for creating sustainability and scalability of the measures that a particular project is seeking to implement. But I think it's very important to integrate more and more a gender-sensitive approach to a solution that would help you create the sustainability that we're seeking for when implementing the project. So I believe that sometimes we separate gender as only one policy, and then we promote, let's say, a policy on adaptation, or a sectorial policy on water or energy. And I think it's important to try and to combine the more and mainstream gender into the type of instruments and planning exercises that we often do, as I was saying, to ensure that the climate projects are sustainable.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Your points resonated with me so well. I could be here all day talking to you. What we're going to do is we're going to loop back for a moment to Saraswati, who began our panel, and ask you, Saraswati, would you like to make any further comments on what Nozipo and Andrea have said before we go to audience questions and answers? Over to you.
Gracias, Marie. Sí.
Thank you, Marie. Yes, truly a great part that the colleagues mentioned is still part of the discussion and the everyday of transversalization of the focus of gender. However, I think that it's definitely important to mention that transversalization in gender has to include a warranty in terms of funds. Very often we have the opportunity of generating an important gender analysis and to propose important activities within an action plan. However, not necessarily they don't echo in terms of budget. And in that way, that decreases the possibilities of implementation. On the other hand, I think that it is important and necessary to have a possibility to support in the improvement of the capacities of our colleagues with whom we work, because the abilities or capacities are different, and we need to support in the understanding of the gender focus, the adequate understanding of the gender focus, and always looking at it from a place of opportunity. Very often, and from the experience that I'm sure many of us have lived, we have seen that when we talk about transversalization of the gender focus, we feel intimidated because it implies more work, quote unquote. However, all that more work implies opportunities and the possibility of achieving true sustainable development. Thank you, Marie. That was like an additional response to what I had mentioned earlier.
That's perfect. Thank you so much to all three amazing panelists. Now, Tara, back to you. I think you're going to facilitate the next part. Thanks.
I am. So we do have a few minutes left in our webinar for questions and answers. So if you would like to put any additional questions into the chat, I've already seen several, or to raise your hand to ask a brief question. That's one reason we've set up this meeting this way, so that you can ask in your own language, whatever works best for you. So I wanted to address quickly some of the questions that I already saw in the chat. I think what was just said by Saraswati about more work actually being an opportunity to do things right and better is one of the answers to this question of how do we ensure that the guide will be accepted by the entities and the climate funds. And of course, there is no guarantee, but we've invited many entities here today in the hopes that they will see the value and the effectiveness that can happen in climate projects when taking some of these recommendations on board, as many as possible. I also see another question on recognizing the continuity between designers and implementers is due to this disconnect, as designers are usually consultants and engaged for only a dedicated time. You know, perhaps the answer is planning an extra to their contract. And I would say that it was amazing, the conversations that I was having during this project about the design of terms of reference, the thought that has to go into how do you have a contract that enables the people that are only being brought on for a certain part of the project to continue to stay engaged and involved. And I think that there could be some sharing of some creative models, especially as we are bridging this divide between ensuring that there's input and expertise in various ways and part-time ways, and having fully integrated members of the team that do have gender expertise. I would open it to any of the panelists if they wanted to comment further on any of those two questions on ensuring that there is uptake of these recommendations, and how do we deal with the consultant piece of this and how that is often handled separately and differently.
Can I go?
Perhaps I can come in.
Oh.
Thank you. Very briefly, just to reflect on the first point, why is it important? Why is it attractive? I would say that it's very important because if we promote, if we do gender from the beginning, we're ensuring that the project is inclusive, there's country ownership, that it's receptive towards people. I think it's very, very important, not just as we say, to work with just one sector of society. We need all the stakeholders in the climate change policy in order to ensure that we have good results. So it takes longer, but it's a necessary process, and it will be more successful in the long run because you will ensure that you have a strong proposal, a written strong proposal, but at the same time, a very good proposal when it comes to implementing the actions proposed. And regarding on how to ensure that entities would take on the recommendations that you've created, I would say that it's very important to ensure that there is commitment at the highest level of an institution. At least that's what we've seen in Fundación Avina. Once the directors are into, they have committed to make a change, you see the transformations. Perhaps they are not as fast as we would wish they would be, but they are transformations, and the entity, the institution is growing and growing more towards becoming an entity that at some point would have a very strong gender commitment. So I think that's perhaps a recommendation that could be applicable to any entities that are seeking to acquire some of the recommendations that you have provided. Thank you.
Thank you. I also saw that Saraswati wanted to come in.
Thanks, Tara. Sí, considerando la
Thank you,
primera pregunta.
Tara. Yes, so thinking about the first question, I wanted to share the following. At this time, we don't have a standard. In other words, inside the Climate Fund, talking about what Andrea was sharing, we're always invited to do more, right? To do transformative work. Now, following that logic, I think that the work is inward about the institution that we work with. Now, looking internally, inwards in the institution, I think that we need to look at the possibility to do this exercise, looking at the different opportunities. Now, in this way, I think that we always have to take a look, figure out how far do you want to create transformative gender action. And of course, that would be our opportunity to advance, to further work further do our work and also further equity in different projects as well. Now, remembering that inside the fund, we have many projects. There are many different projects included. And this is also part of the technical team designing and implementing that project to be certain about what exactly will be efficient. Sometimes it also happens to us that gender specialists, we have this specific outlook that we want to go so far, and then we are confronted with a project, and honestly, we don't have those possibilities of the implementation team. That's why, going back to what I shared in my initial intervention, we need to work as a team. That way, we can really go forward, advance in a transformative, real way as far as like what can be proposed. Thank you.
Excellent. Nazipo, I would love to hear your thoughts as we wrap up.
One of the speakers who spoke about creating continuity for projects during implementation. I think this can be quite tricky. I remember when I finished one of the projects that I did, the proposal was submitted. The implementing agency was showing signs that they would be interested in me maybe putting in an application for gender officer. And I remember speaking with one of the team members that it's something that I never want to do, because then you'd be like stuck in one project, and you yourself as the gender expert, you also want to have a few action plans under your belt, so to speak. So to create continuity, because there are not many gender and climate change or gender and biodiversity, climate sustainable development experts, we need to attach more people, invite more people, more aspiring gender experts to participate in the project so that we can build a pool of gender experts through the climate finance programs. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. We just have a few minutes left, but I have a very important question that I want to ask everyone, particularly as we have provided interpretation today. We have two questions that we would love your feedback on. First of all, was this a useful session? And then secondly, recognizing that we do not have the guide translated into French and Spanish, would this be useful? If you can answer for yourself. I'm excited to announce that next week we will have designed versions of the executive summaries available, and I'll email all of the registrants to this webinar as soon as those are available. Apologies that they weren't available today, but you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get things designed. And I recognize that we did not have as much time for questions and conversation, as I feel like there is a lot of interest in this topic. If you would like to continue conversation, please feel free to contact me directly, because I do think these things that we were discussing and talking about really merit further consideration as we figure out how to best address these challenges. I see that the link directly to the guide has been put into the chat, which several of you were inquiring about. It's also linked in your emails about this particular event. So I hope that everyone is able to click on the poll. And thank you so much for all of your time. We have just a minute left, so I would love to pass back over to my colleague, Marie, if she has any closing thoughts after hearing this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's been a fantastic hour. I just have two things to say. What has really come to the fore for me during this discussion is how much we all feel as a community that women's insights and experience need to be valued in climate finance projects. And ultimately, if we value them, we need to pay for them sufficiently. That's really all I'd like to add. Thanks so much, Tara, and to everyone who has joined today.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure spending this portion of our International Women's Day with you. A big thank you to our interpretation team, which helped make this event accessible.